Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Parenting is Easy, Said No One Ever. I have a really awesome guest with me today, and his name is Terry Tucker. And I want to tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to let him sort of introduce himself as well. And we're going to get right into our discussion for today. So, Terry is a motivational speaker, author, and international podcast guest on topics of motivation, mindset, and self development. He has a degree from Boston University, has played, and has also received a degree from the Citadel. He is in his professional career. He has been a marketing executive, hospital administrator, a SWAT team hostage negotiator, which hopefully we'll get to talk about a little bit as we hear as well. A high school basketball coach, business owner, and motivational speaker. And he has also been a cancer warrior, which is something that I think is near and dear to many people over here, and that's something we'll get to talk about as well. He is author of the book Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, and he has been on The Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership magazines. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you in person, Mr. Terry Tucker. Terry, thank you so much for joining us.
Chananya, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
So there are so many different parts of your background that I think could be so helpful to what we talk about over here. And being that we are a podcast about parenting and the struggles that come with it, which are very, very normal, I want to sort of open the floor to you regarding things that you've been through that has sort of led you to be able to talk about your parenting and the journey that you've been on from there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to go back to my own parents. I think our parents. I am the oldest of three boys. I have no sisters, and what our parents taught us, I think, was the importance of family, of loving for each other, of caring for each other, of supporting each other. And all my brothers and I were athletes. We all played in college, whether it was baseball or basketball. I had one brother that was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers and the National Basketball Association. And so my parents did what I used to call divide and conquer parenting, where, I would have a game on a particular night at this location, and my brother would have a practice at the exact same time at another location. So dad would go to my game, mom would go. So our whole family revolved around our athletics and the programs and the games and the practices that we were on. And so when my wife and I had our daughter, we have one child, a daughter, I will never forget this. We're at the OBGYN and the doctor was like, "Do you want to know what sex it is?" We said, "Sure." And, of course, the sex is determined by the dad. Thank you very much. And it's like, "Well, you should buy pink." And I was like, "Oh, no. You need to leave it in there till it's done. I have no idea how to raise a girl whatsoever." I went to an all boys Catholic high school. When I went to the Citadel, it was an all male school at the time. So raising a girl was daunting for me, but it was the best thing without a doubt that I've ever done in my life.
That's amazing. I want to go back to something you were saying regarding this divide and conquer. Can you talk a little bit about that? Where does that coming from? And what did you notice in the way your parents did it with you and your two brothers to how you work with that now in the balancing of life and being a parent as well?
I think it's about communication. It's about, and my dad traveled a lot. And so, I want to say that happened, and it did. It happened quite a bit where, dad would go to my game or mom would go to my game and dad would go to a practice. But there were also times where dad wasn't there. So it was like, well, you're older, so I'm going to drop you off at your game with your coach. And now I'm going to go with your brother and be at his practice and stuff like that. So it was a lot of communication. We had this big calendar up where, we could write, what game, what practice, what time, where, and all that stuff. And it was just, I think it sort of fed my obsession of being on time and being where I'm supposed to be and all that. But my parents were all about us. And, my dad worked, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And it was about family and the importance of family in our lives. And I'm older, so I see younger people. I have a neighbor who every day at the same time comes out with her two boys and lets them run around. But she's on the phone the entire time. there's no interaction with their kids. There's no, here, give me a hug, or let me, toss a ball with you, or stuff like that. Yeah, at my point in my life with my cancer and that, my bucket list, I got one thing on it. I would like to go to the Field of Dreams baseball diamond and play catch with my daughter. It's not a big thing, but for me, it's what we did. I mean, my daughter and I grew up with sports, and she became, she was born in March. I remember literally having her in one hand and the remote control in the other during March Madness, during the college basketball playoffs. And it just didn't get any better than that at that point in time, but it did. It got better as she got older.
So I'm hearing a few things that I want to sort of circle back to. So first is that calendar that was hanging in your house, and having everyone's, I guess you could say, schedules all in one place. So in DBT therapy, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, there's a concept that we call coping ahead, which basically is just planning for all situations. And when kids, especially, who also crave structure, but that's for a conversation for a different time, when they see parents putting a schedules out there, say, okay, this is what we're doing when, and then they get to see it, it's sort of getting it into their heads of, okay, so, Terry has a schedule at this time, John has a schedule over here, Steve has a schedule over here, and it may not be that dad's going to be able to be at all three places at once. After all, he's only human, so he can only be at one place. So even though he may not be with me in my game, but that doesn't mean he's not with me. And there's something to that. I think you were saying that when you have that household that is constantly working with the children to say, hey, we're all about us. We're all about us being together. I don't necessarily have to be with you in order to be with you. So can you talk about that feeling that you had? Because it sounds like that's something you did have from your father. How did that sort of manifest itself in you regarding you being a parent now? And what do you think your father was doing to sort of bring that feeling inside of you?
Yeah, my dad was an athlete. He played basketball in high school and in college, and then there was conscription in the United States at the time, so he had to go into the Army for 2 years, and he played on his base football team, basketball team, softball team, and things like that. So my dad knew sports, and I think we tend to parent the way we know, and whether that be good or bad. You saw good examples of parenting or bad examples of parenting, and you sort of parent that forward. I don't know if I just coined a new term there, but you sort of parent that forward, whether it's good or bad. And hopefully, you're smart enough, intelligent enough to say, okay, I didn't like that. It's kind of like character. Character is caught, not taught. You're not going to read a book or go to a class and say, okay, now I got great character. You watch people and say, well, I like that, or I don't like that. And so my parents weren't perfect. Don't get me wrong. I think, every family in some way is dysfunctional, but my parents put faith and love first. They loved each other. Faith was big in our family. And so those were the sort of overarching themes that they parented by. And, like I said, they weren't perfect, but I took a lot of what they did and I used it with our daughter. And I'm the oldest of three boys. My wife is the youngest of four children. So, we've kind of got a different dichotomy going there, but it was just, my parents were good role models. They weren't, like I said, not perfect role models, but they were good role models.
I don't think there is such a thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There isn't. But I took the best of what they did and tried to improve on the things that I thought, maybe they could do a little bit better. I don't have all the answers, but I think my wife and I did the best we could.
Right. I think that's a part of it, is also embracing the fact that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm picturing, as you said, those words, faith and love. I'm picturing they're like in an archway in front of your house as you're growing up, and it was literally embedded into everything of it was embedded into the walls of the house. But that doesn't mean that things are going to be perfect.
Right.
Mom and dad can still have anger. They can still mess up. They can still do things that are below our expectations that we might have for them. And I think part of us observing things in our parents is realizing that's normal, and they are normal people, and they are going to be people, human beings, like every other species on this planet, make mistakes, do things that they shouldn't be doing. And through our being able to absorb that in a way where we want to be able to pass that on and have children of our own, and bring the next wonderful generation into the world, when we take those foundation, that arch, and we want to plant it in ourselves, maybe change around the words a little bit for whatever works for our family, that's okay. And realizing that I'm also not going to be perfect, and I'm able to be the best human being, and for my daughter to know that daddy's not perfect is very much a part of what that parenting really, really is. So I love
It
that
is,
point. I love what
and
you're
being
saying.
able to say, "I'm sorry" when I mess up, even if
Mhm.
it's to your 5 year old. I messed up. I remember when
Oh
I
yeah.
started as a police officer. Our daughter was young, and I developed, for lack of a better term, some salty language that I would bring home and say to my wife. I would never say it around my daughter, but she was in the house, and
Right.
my wife finally kind of pulled me aside. She's like, "You can't say that stuff." Our
Mm.
daughter's name's Michaela. Michaela is like a sponge. She hears you saying that stuff. And I'll never forget when I was 5 years old. I still remember this. I came out for a birthday party, and my grandfather was a Chicago police officer. And I came out to this big table in the driveway, and there was no place for me to sit. And I walked out and looked at the table and said, "Where the hell am I going to sit?" And I spent my 5th birthday in my room because my parents were like, "Oh, heck no, we're not having that language." They used to say that when I was growing up, there was only 2 ways to die. One was natural causes. The other was talking back to your parents. So, that didn't fly in our house at all.
Right.
But kids learn from us. They watch us, they observe us, and they are like sponges. And if they see us doing something, like, well, it must be okay because mom and dad wouldn't do it, if it wasn't in my best interest. So I can do it as well. So we have to kind of be
Yeah.
careful in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. And I also love the fact, I think one of the things that I'm hearing and everything that you're saying, Terry, is sports, and how far that goes in family dynamics to help with structure, to help teach obedience, and there's so many different parts of what sports can do for the family dynamics, and also for, maybe even more importantly, for the individual as well, and their place within the family, and realizing, okay, so like we're saying before, daddy's not gonna be able to show up to this. Okay, so that doesn't mean I don't have to try my best. I don't have to show off, but I still have a job to do, and I have responsibility, and I still have practice I need to attend to, and I also make sure I do my schoolwork so that I can get to practice on time. All those things come into play. I'm curious, how have you taken that? Um, I guess you could say that lesson of sports, and how that was a seed planted in you as a child. How have you passed it on to your daughter?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yes, my dad may be out of town on a business trip, but after the game, we would call him, and and he would ask, "How did you do?" And "What did you think about this? And did you have any problems?" And so it was like he was there, but it was just in a different way. And I think the same thing with our daughter. I'll never forget, we put her in YMCA basketball, and it was really early on. It was just learning the rules, understanding the game. It wasn't about winning or losing or anything. And afterwards, at the end of the season, okay, we're going to grab everybody together. We're going to sit them down. All right, when I call your name, come up, you get a trophy. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. What do you get a trophy for? You only get trophies in life when you're successful with something. You don't get trophies for showing up. And I didn't let our daughter keep that trophy. It's like, no, you don't get a trophy. Mom and dad should get a trophy for getting you to practice in the games every day, but you don't get that. And I think that's what team sports teach us. They teach us,
Yes.
how to be a good teammate. They teach us how to win. They teach us how to lose. They teach us how to deal with our emotions. They teach us all kinds of things, how to be coached, how to be coachable in life. And if you don't let your kid fail, if you don't let your kid, have a coach yell at him and stuff like that, and them look at you in the stands like, "Don't look at me. That's your coach. I'm your dad." As long as he doesn't abuse you, he can yell at you all he wants. But that's something I think today, especially when I was even a high school coach, where parents were like, "Well, I know what to do." It's like, excuse me, I played in college. You didn't even play in grade school. So please don't, I used to tell my parents at the parent meeting, if you don't come and tell me how to do my job, I won't show up at your job and tell you how to be an accountant or a lawyer or whatever it
Right.
ends up
No, that's
doing.
actually a good
So
point. I'm happy you bringing that up, because that's something I didn't want to touch on over here. As someone that has experience working with other children in a coaching manner, what advice would you give to parents? Two ways. First of all, what their reactions or how they should be behaving when it comes to observing their kids by a game, and secondly, regarding how they should be parenting their child that is wanting to do better at sports, but is struggling with staying on a team, being on a team, making practice and stuff, what would you tell the parents regarding how to work with their child that is wanting to be more involved in sports, but is struggling with that?
I would tell them, first of all, don't make your teammates and the coach the enemy. I made $2,000 a year to coach high school basketball, and the amount of time I put into it ended up being like, I was making like $1.50 an hour with what I put into it. Right. So I'm not doing this because I'm trying to get rich. I'm doing this because I want to make your children better. So don't go home and say, well, coach didn't play, he doesn't know what he's talking about and things like that. And I know parents do that because they want to ease their kids' fears. Want to
validate the kids' feelings.
Exactly. And it's like, no, you need to help your kids fail. You need to just shut up. You see all these kids today, the parents put them in AAU and travel teams and all that kind of stuff. And they think their kid's going to be the next Michael Jordan or Mike Trout or LeBron James or whatever it is. Statistically, that's never going to happen. Statistically, 7% of kids in high school ever make it even to college, and not alone into the professional ranks. So let your kid enjoy the game. Don't do this. Don't force your kid into a sport because it's something you enjoy. Do it so that you can bond with your child. And when you go home after the game, be positive. Hey, did you work hard? Did you give the coach your best? Did you give the team your best? If you did, I don't care what the scoreboard said. Let's face it. Who cares what a high school basketball game score is? It doesn't matter. But bond with your children over the sport. Don't push them into it and make them hate it because you're so intense with it that you want them to get a college scholarship or whatever it ends up being.
Beautiful. No, I agree with that 100%. And thank you for saying that. Just to go back to what I was saying before regarding the validation, I think it's very important to constantly be validating your child, but that doesn't mean someone else has to go down because of the validation. Right. So, just when a child's coming home and saying, "Oh, the ref was bleep," or there's something else that they're complaining about, I don't get enough playing time. Okay, so what can you do about it? How can you? What is it that we can do to sort of get you to a place that coach sees you more and is doing something to you're doing something with your child to help recognize that, okay, I can do things to fix myself, and it's not necessarily about the other people, which is I think the message that you're saying over here regarding a coach. How about
Can I just have one thing to that?
Yeah.
So I had a rule that I would not talk to the parents about playing time until the player came to me. This is high school. So, they should be able to articulate, hey, coach, why aren't I playing? Let's sit down and talk about it. I'll tell you why you're not playing. And here's what you can do to get more playing time. But if they're not going to talk to me, I'm not going to talk to mom and dad. They've got to come to me first. And we've got to have that discussion. If you're not happy about it and you want to go talk to your parents, that's fine. I'll tell your parents the same thing I told you. But again, that's responsibility. That's how it works in the real world. You don't like something, you've got to go fight for yourself. You've got to be an advocate for yourself. You've got to ask why or how can I get better? And I think that's another thing that sports teaches us.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's beautiful. Have you ever had conversations with kids based on the behaviors that you guys have witnessed in the stands from parents? And how do you deal with that? Because sometimes, I think kids could get embarrassed when they hear parents, whether it's their own parents or other parents talking in a certain way. How do you talk to kids about that?
I talked to the parents. To be honest with you, I remember a specific event. I called the timeout. I called the play, and one of the players goes out onto the court. Her dad is in the stands, like 2 rows, and he's telling her what to do. And after the game, I pulled him aside. I said, "Hey, I just told her to do something entirely different than you told her to do. Please don't do that, because all it's doing is confusing her." It's like, wait a minute, my coach told me this, but my dad's telling me this. I said, and she was paralyzed. She didn't know what to do.
Yeah. And you're putting your child in a really awkward position.
Exactly. So don't, again, if you want to coach, hey, I'd be happy to give up my job if you want to do this. But at the same time, you're putting the kid in a bad situation. And the kid kind of looked at me like, these big eyes, like, I don't know what to do.
Oh, gosh.
And didn't do anything. So I did say to her afterwards, I'm like, look, don't worry about it. I'll talk to your dad and we'll get this straightened out. Okay. And I did. Really and he was good about it. I don't think parents do it from a sense of, I don't like the coach. It's more of, I want my kid to
Hopefully.
succeed. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I want to switch gears over here. I know that there's
Sure.
probably so many things regarding sports that we can talk about, but we talked a little bit about your battle with cancer. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that's been like over the past couple of years, where you are now with that, and also based on what we're talking about over here, what type of effect has that had on your parenting?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed a little over 11 years ago with a rare form of melanoma that appeared on the bottom of my foot. During that 11-year period, I was initially told I'd be lucky to live 2 years. They had no medications. All they could offer me was surgery. If it's somewhere we can cut it out, we will. Otherwise, sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. 11 years later, I am still here, but I've also spent 5 years on a drug that gave me the flu every week for those 5 years. I had my foot amputated in 18, my leg amputated in 2020. I have tumors in my lungs now, which I'm treated for every 3 weeks. When I was diagnosed, our daughter was in high school.
I
And
just want to take a
so,
minute just because you just give us a lot of information there, and that's like a lot of stuff, Terry. Right? That's a lot. I just want to take a second just to sort of let that settle in of what your life has been like and what you've been going through over the past 11 years, and the fact that there are parts of your body that you're not with anymore, and that's a big deal, and that's something that can affect so many people in so many ways. Now obviously there's a part of you that you've talked about this a lot, so there's a certain level of, I guess you could say, robotic talk that comes with it. But I'm curious, when you talk about it, like what comes up for you when you talk about the fact that there are things that I used to do, considering you're a Division I basketball player, Division I and NCAA basketball player, and to where you are now. What has that experience been like for you?
Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II, had a great quote. He said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." And I guess
Yeah,
I
I love
kind
that.
of look at it that way, that, I just need to keep going. I don't certainly don't like the cards that I've been dealt, but this is my life. And I have to play this. I have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And so I guess, I just fight every day. I sort of look at it like I taught my daughter how to live. And I look at it right now, I'm also teaching her how to die, because we're all going to die at some point. But what
Mm.
I had a nurse recently ask me, what was it like to have my foot amputated, my leg amputated? And I told her, certainly hasn't been easy. I'm 6'8" tall, so falling, learning to walk again, it's not a good thing. But what I did tell her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties,
Mm.
but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my
Beautiful.
soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And we spend a ton of time working on this body. And I'm not telling you not to, but what I am suggesting is maybe every day we spend a little more time working on our heart, our mind, our soul, because this
Sure.
body's going to die and it's going to decay. Our heart, our mind, our soul, those things are eternal and will live on. So why don't we spend as much time working on them as we do going to the gym and working on our,
Mm.
our abs or our biceps?
Right. It's so well said, and thank you so much for sharing your experience with that. It was actually something that in a talk that came up recently with someone on a different podcast called talking about Viktor Frankl,
Yeah.
man's search for meaning, and saying that they were able to take away whatever they wanted from me, but they could never take away my mind. And thinking some of that has been through horrific, life changing events decades ago, and hearing someone just as wise in a way saying that of how that's affected him, I think has such an impact on us, hearing that there are certain things that no matter what we'll never lose unless we give it up. So we
Yes.
have that choice to make. So I'm curious to hear from you, and you said it so beautifully regarding teaching your daughter how to die as well. What has that experience been like for you, before we get to your child's point of view into things? What's that been like for Terry to be able to have this opportunity to do something with a very positive, long-lasting, effective light to it, of teaching such something that I think many of us as parents don't think of teaching a child how to die in a certain way. What's that experience been like for you?
I, you know, and I'm going to go back to sports again because it's what I know. And what I learned, one of the things I learned from being part of a team, and for me it was sports. I think it can be whatever team you're on. We're all on a team of some
Sure,
kind.
100%.
Is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And so right now I am on a clinical trial drug that more than likely is not going to save my life. I've been on it for almost 3 years now. And it's terribly, I have terrible side effects from it. And the nurses kind of look at me like I'm nuts. Like, why do you keep coming back? Why do you keep doing this? And I tell them that. I'm like, this is part of something that's bigger than me. I may not benefit from this. It may not save my life, but it may save the life of somebody 5 years from now, 10 years from now, based on the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood tests and my scans and things like that. And for me, that's being part of something that's bigger than me. And that's what's important to me. And I think down deep in our heart and our soul, that's really what's important to all of us. It's not about you. It's about us. And I think you said that before. It's about us when we're talking about family. And that's an important lesson that I don't think a lot of people learn. It's not about you. It's about us collectively.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's so eloquently said. I think it's more than just, I don't know if this drug is going to work or not, but the fact that you consider yourself part of this trial, that it's going to do something for someone, maybe me, maybe not. I'm willing to do whatever it is I need to do, and the doctors need to do what they need to do. We're all doing our part, and as long as we're all doing it, it's all part of something. It's the means for a greater good, and that in itself, what I'm hearing from you, has given you the motivation to continue doing the things you're doing and be able to talk about losing body parts and not being able to do things like you once were. And it also doesn't take away from what it is you want to do and what you plan on doing. It's not like, there's a bucket list. There are future things that you want to be a part of, and it doesn't take away just because of the cards that you've been dealt. So I think that goes a very long way. And I think it's so inspiring to hear that, yes, I don't like the cards I've been dealt, which, by the way, I think that acknowledgement in itself says a lot, because I think the acknowledgement of what the self is going through and what we're, whether it's a suffering, whether it's an ailment, whether it's a loss, to acknowledge that is such an important part of whatever it is that we're going through. And then also how that's going to affect the other people around us. That's one of the first steps for whatever it is that we're looking to work with or to change. From there, then saying, okay, I still have a job to do, so let me do it. Let me have that mindset to say, I'm going to do the best I can with the cards that I've dealt. Are things going to be different? Yes. Am I going to be able to do certain things that I was doing before? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that I can't do certain things, or I can't, like you're saying, can't be part of a team, which is something that you still feel a part of. The other thing that I was thinking about as well, one of the things that I do outside of this room is I'm a trauma therapist, and one of the things that I talk about a lot is trauma has been caused through relationships, and the way we heal from trauma is through relationships. And we all need people. We all need to be a part of something. And unfortunately, in a lot of different situations, we've been in situations where people have wronged us, or have left a negative effect on us in whatever situation, or done horrible things to each other. And the way we sort of cure from that, and we get better from that, and we get to a place to be able to not just survive but thrive in our lives, is to be able to have those relationships. And that's something you're doing. It's not my line. That's something that someone that comes from Pia Melody in the Meadows. But that's something that I talk about a lot, and I think you're a organic example of that. Thinking about that being able, we're a part of something, and that's the way we have to sort of live our lives. What type of conversations have you had with your daughter on this topic of there might be an ending that doesn't end in happily ever after? What are those conversations like with your daughter?
Yeah, we've certainly talked about it. I'll give you a quick example. When I had my leg amputated, my doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy, and I said to him, "Is it going to save my life?" And he's like, "Well, probably not, but it might buy you some more time." And I was 8 years into this fight, I said, well, if the outcome's going to be the same, I don't think I want to do it, but let me go home and talk to my family. And it's a funny story, but it really did happen this way. So I go home and I start talking to my wife and daughter, and my daughter's immediately, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's three of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, you know? So we end up sitting around the kitchen table individually talking about how we feel about me taking chemotherapy. And when we're done with that, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand like, wait a minute, am I getting outvoted for something I don't want to do? But I remembered back when I was in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. And so, I mean, my daughter and I, she's seen me. She's picked me up from treatments when I've been a mess. She's seen me throw up and, you know, have diarrhea and, you know, deal with not having a leg and try. I had my leg amputated during COVID. I was not allowed to have anyone with me during that surgery. I was the only.
Which is probably in some ways just as hard as actually getting the leg amputated.
Yeah. I mean, they told me I should be in the hospital for 2 weeks to learn how to use, you know, a walker or a wheelchair and all that. I was in the hospital for 48 hours and sent home and said, you know, you can't be here because of COVID. And so it was like, all right, I got to learn this stuff. I got to figure it out. And again, it's not so much. I mean, we've had the conversations. She knows how I feel about her. I know how she feels about me. But you got to be able to walk the walk in addition to talking the talk. You know, you can't say, oh, I've got a tough mindset and I'm tough and I can handle all this, and then you can't. And don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody has a breaking point, and I think that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever give ourselves credit for. We quit, we give up long before our bodies wear out and that. So it's a matter of saying, okay, we've talked about this. Now I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to show you that I can do this as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Very, very well said. And you talked a little bit about with me, you know, before we pressed record over here on what the feeling was like when your daughter graduated. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that experience has been like for you?
Yeah, so our daughters are graduated of the United States Air Force Academy. And when she was in middle school, she was diagnosed with dyslexia, an anxiety disorder, and an attention disorder. And we gave her, we worked with a learning specialist. As a matter of fact, probably quarterly, I still am in contact with her learning specialist to basically set her up to be successful in the classroom. And, you know, I remember when I was in high school, you know, I would have the radio on and my mother, you know, turn that off and study and that kind of thing. But our daughter learns with music. She learns with color and things like that. And we used to always tell her, play to your strengths, you know, do the things you're good at. And so, you know, here we go. You know, in high school, she gets different, what's the word I'm looking for? She's allowed to take her test in a different room, you know, get longer for it, accommodations. And so she gets these accommodations.
504 plans, or is it what I think they're called?
Yeah, exactly. And well, now she gets accepted to the Air Force Academy. She was actually went on a basketball scholarship, but they're like, yeah, we don't do that. So it's sink or swim time. So you can imagine my wife and I and how proud we were on that day in May when she walks across that stage, gets that diploma, and shakes hands with the President of the United States. You know, it's like, yeah, it didn't get any better than this. And I still to that day, I mean, it almost brings me to tears when I think about it. And we get my wife and I are like, you know, people are like, oh, I don't know, great job. I'm like, she did all the heavy lifting. You know, we just kind of were there to support her through that. And there were times where she called, I don't think I can. Yeah, I get it, but you can't. Don't worry about tomorrow. Take care of today. Take care of today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. So we supported her in that regard, but I can't, other than her being born, I can't think of a day in my life when I was more proud.
That's amazing. It's amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, finding that learning specialist. So what was your experience like of first getting your child diagnosed and then looking for the right therapist, psychotherapist, learning specialist? What was yours and your wife's game plan going into that? And how did you find what it is that you needed for your daughter?
Yeah, so we ended up, school wants to have a talk with us. Okay, sits us down, says, your daughter's doing terrible on tests, but when we bring her up and talk to her and ask her the questions that are on the test, she's absolutely able to give us the information. So she
Right.
knows it. There's a disconnect in getting it down on paper and things like that. We think we should have her evaluated. Okay, fine. And that evaluation was not just her, but my wife and I. We went through, here, let's spend an hour with the psychologist and ask the questions and answer the questions
Beautiful.
and things like that. And then it was, look, here are some individuals that we think can help her. But the thing that bothered me about the school is when she came back after that, the first question they asked was, well, what medication is she on?
Oh gosh.
Medication.
Uh,
Why would she need medication? Is she being disruptive in class? Is she doing? No, she's not any of that. She's not on any
right.
medication. She just learns differently. And so the Catholic school, we are Catholic. The Catholic school that we had her with in Texas, in Houston, did not have a learning specialist. The Jewish school did. So guess where our Catholic daughter, went to school? To the Jewish school. And I mean, it was an amazing experience for her. She learned Judaic, she learned Hebrew. It was great because all the kids would come over and she would tutor them. I'm like, wait a minute, these are Jewish kids. Why are you tutoring them in these subjects? But it was a great experience for her, and they had that learning specialist.
Mm,
So it was just a matter of finding the right person and interviewing them.
right.
Tell us, based on what you see here, what are you going to do for our daughter? How are you going to do that?
Wow.
And then it was a matter of getting her to those appointments every week. And she hated them. I'll be honest with you. She couldn't stand going to them.
Sure.
But the learning specialist today has her picture up in her office and said, look, this girl had the same thing you did. And now she's an officer in the United States military,
Wow.
graduated the Air
Wow.
Force Academy.
That's
So
amazing. That's amazing.
it is.
That's unbelievable. I think one of the things that stood out for me as you're talking about that is you and your wife talking about the team aspect of things, being on the same team and realizing,
Oh, yeah.
okay, our daughter does things differently than, let's say, you and I have been doing, and our experience in school. So what does she need? And what you guys did was, as a team, you not only did you stick together, but it's staying curious. And I talk about the concept, and this is something that Bessel van der Kolk talks about a lot in his book. And if you got a chance to read it, The Body Keeps the Score. He talks about this concept of just be curious and stay curious, and being able to learn from everything around you in order to be the best version of yourself. And as a parent, we want the best for our children, and sometimes it's stepping out of our comfort zone. So if it's switching to a school that's from a different faith than ours, okay, but that's what we need to do because that's what our daughter needs. It's not even, and when you're saying over the story, it wasn't like a question like, I don't know, it's a Jewish school, I don't know if we should go there. It wasn't like that. It was, we need to do what our daughter needs, so therefore that's what we're going to do. So staying curious, looking at it to say, yes, it's our daughter and she does things differently, and we're going to do the best for her, whatever the heck it takes. And therefore that's something that you and your wife did together. And I think that's a very, very valuable lesson in like we started off saying today, of that concept of communication and where that goes, and the importance of it, and no matter what team you're on, to have that communication. And and hearing how that's been really brought down into everyday life and everyday part of everything that you do, of staying curious and bringing that communication, and to the point where your daughter is calling a family meeting for the three of you. Where does that come from? That comes from parents that were discussing, okay, well, our daughter has certain things that she needs extra help in. Well, let's go find another place for her. And it's those seeds that were planted then in mom and dad into the foundation of the family, into that arch that we were talking about earlier from your parents, that has now led to the fact that you can see her walk across the stage and get her hand, and getting that diploma and being able to shake the president's hand, which is I think something that all of us want as parents, to be able to, not just whether it's seeing our children walk across the stage and getting their hands shaken by the president of the United States, or getting a diploma and moving that tassel from one side to the other, or finding their partner in life, whatever it is that they're looking to do. When we're showing for them that, hey, we have your back and we'll do whatever the hell it takes, excuse my language, in order to go ahead and do what is best for them, then they feel part of the system as well. And they feel like, hey, this archway that mom and dad got from their mom and dads, I want that too. And I want to install that into myself. And I think that's something that you've talked a lot about today, that being something that has been so ingrained not only in you and your wife, but you've been able to pass it on to your daughter and to see where she is as well. And it sounds like there's been so many different things, and I'm sure there are so many more stories when it comes to amputations and how things are today, and different appointment, and what your daughter's emotions have been like, just being there with you through the treatments, picking you up, having these meetings around the table. There's so many more things that for us to talk about over here. We're going to sort of wrap it up over here a little bit. I'm curious, based on our conversation, are there certain specific points or pointers that maybe we haven't touched on that you might feel might be important for the purpose of this podcast to talk about over here?
I guess I'll give you another story. I got stories about sports. I got stories about nursing. All my nursing, So I mean, you talk about what you know.
I'm a sucker for sports as well, so I'll take the sports ones.
I had a nurse who, when I initially met her, very young, maybe 25, but was a nurse, but was learning how to do things on the unit, the infusion unit, where I get my treatment. And about 8 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she comes into my room and she said, "Terry, I got a story I want to tell you, but I'm a little uncomfortable telling it to you." And I didn't know how to respond to that. It was like, well, I bet I would enjoy it. I hope you decide you want to tell me. So next couple hours, she's in and out, giving me medicine and things like that. Finally, she comes in, she sits down, she said, "All right, here's the story." She said, "When I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my mom and dad. I was going to quit nursing, and I was going to go to work for Amazon." And she said, "And then I met you. And I see what you go through. I see you keep coming back every day, no matter how bad you feel. And then I went to your file, your chart, and I read everything you've been through." And she said, "When I finished that, I knew I was where I was supposed to be." Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had had a positive impact on her. I would venture to say that all of us, there's somebody out there or multiple people out there that are looking at us right now and would give everything they have just to spend 5 minutes in our shoes. So as bad as you may think things are, as lousy as you think your life may be, as the lemons that you have now that you're trying to make lemonade out of, understand that there are people watching how you handle your situation and think you are an amazing, incredible human being. So I guess the bottom line is, no matter how bad things are, people are watching how you handle it, how the courage that you're putting forward, and understanding that, realize that whether you know it or not, you're having a positive impact on other people.
Sure. Very well said. And I think that's something that's manifested in your life very well, seeing what your daughter has learned from you and your experiences and what she's doing with her life. So I think she's made some pretty good lemonade with the lemons that she's been dealt with in her life. I do like to add and I happen to love that analogy. I don't know what it is. Ever since I was a little kid, the concept of lemons and lemonade always really I had a soft spot for. Someone told this to me a few years ago, and it resonated with me. And I like sharing this. Is realize also when it comes to making lemonade, it's a process, and if you want it to taste a certain way, you have to add sugar, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the things that we're dealt with, we have to add other things. It's not just about us. It's about having things around us, other ingredients that allow us to have the lemonade. That's what we were talking about regarding the team as well, right? There's such an important part of the team aspect in us, and it's to find that team and to make it something that we're able to be a part of something bigger than just us. I think goes a very, very long way, but very, very well said. And thank you for that. If people want to find more of you, before we wrap up with a few quick fire questions over here, where can people find you?
Yeah, I have a blog. It's called Motivational Check. So motivationalcheck.com. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can get my book there. You can leave me a message. I answer everybody who reaches out to me. All of that is at motivationalcheck.com.
Amazing. Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes. And if any other social media or websites, we'll get to the show notes over there as well. So, quick 3 questions that we like to sort of end all of our interviews with. First, if you could think of a either hysterical, embarrassing, or funny moment as a parent, either that happened to you or you were a part of, can you share that quick story?
Funny, embarrassing. Yeah, I probably could if I could think of one. And I know there's a million probably that I've been out there. So I guess I'll give you this. I talked about coaching high school basketball. I coached my daughter, and I'll tell you, I think that's probably one of the hardest things to be a parent and a coach, especially after what we talked about, if you're the parent, just go home and shut up. Don't let your kid talk. Don't badmouth the coach there. I was the coach, so, I mean, our own daughter was like, why'd you do that, Dad? So there were a lot of times where our daughter went home with mom because mom would drive separately from work, and I would go home by myself because we had, we were sort of like oil and vinegar, oil and water. We didn't mix on those times. I'm not saying it was my proudest day as a parent, but I learned things about that. I learned how to approach other people. I learned how to approach my daughter. It's like, look, I'm in dad mode right now. I'm not in coach mode, or I'm in coach mode now. I'm not in dad mode. I'm going to tell you what you did wrong and how you can get better. That's coach. That's not dad. So it was very hard to wear both of those hats.
Yeah, I hear that, and I'm sure there are just many stories that you and your daughter could look back at now and laugh. So, I think that's very much a part of what parenting is realizing our mistakes, because we are human, like you were saying before. Yeah. If there is a book recommendation other than your own that you would give to others based on whether it's perfecting self to be a better parent or regarding better parenting, what would that book be?
I think a book that I recommend a lot is. Actually, I have it right here. It's called Legacy. This is written by a man by the name of James Kerr. It's about the New Zealand national rugby team. And you're like, well, how does that possibly, go about parenting? It has to do with team. It has to do with basically a team that becomes a family. And when they're looking to bring a new player onto their team or a new coach onto their team, you would think that certainly they're looking for a great rugby player, and they are. But what they're really looking for are 2 things. One, character. What kind of person are you? Do you lose and go home and kick the dog, or do you learn something from it and get better at the next game? And the other thing is humility. Am I able to say, look, I don't have all the answers, and they don't expect you as an individual to have all the answers, but what they expect is you to be part of a team that will figure out the answer. And that's, I think back on my own life, going for job interviews. I better have all the answers or I'm not going to get the job. What they're saying is, no, we don't expect you to have all the answers, but we expect you to come together with your expertise and our expertise, right, and figure out the answer. So Legacy is an amazing book.
And you know what? If you would have, if I had to put money down, I would have bet that it was going to be something to do with sports. So,
right?
It's a great book, and I'll try to get that. I'll link to Amazon or where to buy the book as well, because I like to say I like reading, and I never even heard of this one. So I'm very, very curious about this. My last question to you is: if you can think of a everyday, mundane superpower that would help with your parenting that you don't have that you would like, what would that be?
Boy, that's a great question. I think everything in life, and I have this, I just wish I had more of it. I think everything in life would be better for all of us if we just loved each other. If love was the overarching thing.
So what's the superpower in that? I'm challenging you.
The superpower is you look at things entirely differently when you approach another human being from a place of love, as opposed to a place of competition, or, you're a bad person because you're a lousy coach. Or what if we just loved each other a little bit more and in a little bit greater of a volume of love and less hate? And I think that would be, I mean, the other thing I would say would be listening, listening to understand versus listening to
Superhuman
respond.
listening. Got it.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was
wow.
one thing I learned as a negotiator, the importance of listening to understand versus listening to respond. I may not agree with you, but help me to understand where
100%.
you're coming from. If we did
Beautiful.
that, I think the world would be a better place.
That's amazing. Well, Terry, thank you so much for joining us over here. I hope we get a chance to speak again soon.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Have a good day.
You too.